Hello everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar, Do We Really Need to Have This Meeting? This is Dwight Mahalitz. I'm the President of Effective Managers, and I'm just delighted to be working with you today on this important matter in organization performance and how people work together in organizations. The starting point for this one is really what makes a good meeting, because I hear people talking about good meetings and bad meetings. Frankly, I hear them talking about bad meetings more often than I do hear them talking about good meetings. So I thought it would be interesting to think a little bit about what a good meeting is, and then look at sort of how can we as managers in organizations really do a better job of helping to ensure that people's time is used as wisely as possible. I came across a term on the web as I was preparing for this webinar, and the term was I was meat-napped. So I was meeting-napped, I think is the way they put it, meeting-napped. So people are feeling that they are being kidnapped to go to meetings, and there's actually two definitions for that one. The second one is that they're able to catch a quick nap with their eyes open during the meeting because it doesn't have any relevance to them. So we want to avoid those kinds of situations in organizations. So the starting point then does come along these lines. So why are some meetings great and most meetings tend to be a waste of time? So I think what it really does come down to is communication in the meeting. If you think about a meeting that was great, and if you think back to your own personal experience, a meeting that you felt was a good meeting was a meeting where you had the ability to participate, you received good information, you arrived at a decision or a result that helped you to be able to be more effective in your work. In other words, you came away feeling some improvement in the value of the information that you had for being able to do your work better. On the other hand, the waste of time meetings are those where you attended for whatever reason, you're meeting napped, that you were not able to use your time in a productive way or in a way that you felt was worthwhile for you in that organization. Now, this webinar is not about the mechanics of meetings. I did a quick search on Google, and here you see that there are over 65 million results for the mechanics of a good meeting. I did scan through those, and there is very strong overlap and coincidence of them being very similar in terms of the approaches. Some take slightly different spins. Just to make sure that we're well grounded, what I did do is put together an overview of what I saw as the key common principles for the mechanics of good meetings. This one is based on a list that I found on effectivemeetings.com. With my own website is effectivemanagers.com. I couldn't help but be gravitated to effectivemeetings.com, which we're not related to. And here, as you see, these 9 points are pretty much a good summary of what needs to happen. And I like that starting point. That starting point is an excellent one. Only hold a meeting if it's necessary. Establishing clear objectives, making sure that there's an agenda, circulating meeting information that's well in advance, starting on time. This is something that many organizations fail at miserably. Participants arrive on time and well prepared. The chair facilitates for full participation, so everyone that's involved in the meeting is able to participate. Prepare and circulate minutes, document decisions, review meeting, and so on. So I think these are almost intuitive in terms of how can I do the best job possible in this meeting and make sure that it's a good meeting. So that's all I'm going to say about that. What I wanted to do really today is talk about the so. So if these principles are so well known, and if there's so much consistency across what various consultants and organizations recommend as best practices, then why do we have so many bad meetings? What is it that creates this situation in organizations where people feel that they are meeting napped and that they are forced to do something that is not productive from their perspective? So I think to answer that question, we need to take a step back and have a bit of a wider view. The starting point, I think, really needs to be what is the purpose of meetings? And I referred to this a little bit in my introduction. So meetings are a form of communication. And meetings can be used, I think, for three purposes. The first one is to disseminate information. So it makes sense to pull people together to give them information in a way that's going to be helpful to them. It's also helpful to gather information because in a one-on-one situation, you can get the top-of-mind information from the person you're talking to. But when you gather information in a group environment, one person's thinking triggers thoughts in another person, which creates a synergy of gathering information in a way that is productive. Hence, the whole science of product testing using focus groups, because those individuals in a group can create better information than each one of those individuals would on their own. And then the third one is to exchange views. So to voice different opinions in a productive way so that knowledge can be increased or so that a better decision can be reached at the end of the day. The second aspect of meetings is my third bullet here, that meetings can be either formal, so they're mandated by terms of reference. I think of an audit committee, for instance. Sometimes in organizations, the finance department has a form of meeting that is mandated to support the audit committee. Some meetings are informal, so they address a specific issue, so people come together. The water cooler is a great place for the informal meetings, but they can be slightly more structured than that too. A manager can pull together 3 or 4 peers to talk about something simply because it's of common interest and they want to explore the issue or try to come up with a solution. And then the third one is what I would call as a temporary or project-based, and project team meetings or implementation team groups, I think, fall into that category. So if we think about work for a minute, if we think about the last slide and then marry it with the thinking about the purpose of work. Now, I don't want to get too systemic here on you, but I think it's really important to think about the nature of work because, as you will see as we walk through this presentation, that this drives a lot of the meetings that we really don't need to have in organizations. So on this slide, slide number 10, if we think about the bottom 3 layers of an organization, the director, frontline manager, and the worker, excuse me, the director is accountable for work, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Very cold weather in Canada this month, so not all of Canada. Those of you in Vancouver, it looks wet but not as cold, but we're going to be 20 below today. So anyway, a bit of a cough there. I apologize for that. So the director is accountable for doing value-added work. So as you know from the 5 requirements of managers, doing your own value-added work is a key aspect of doing your work. Some work is chunked up and delegated down to the next level of the organization. So here the frontline manager then does their value-added work. It's probably around a procedure improvement or improving workers, coaching, so on. And then they delegate some work down and coordinate the work of the managers who do their value-added work. So those of you that have attended other webinars of mine have probably seen this slide and I have a webinar that's recorded and available that explores this in a lot more detail. The concept I want to add to it is this one with the red text that I've just put on the screen. So value-added work can also be thought of as direct output work. So this is work that I as an individual am accountable for, and I do this work and I do the work on my own. So I am creating that output. The result of my work is an output that I directly create. A second term I'd introduce to you is in terms of delegation, is delegated direct output. So I'm delegating work to one of my subordinates, and that subordinate is doing the work, and that work is their direct output. So their value-added work is direct output. I give you those 2 terms to introduce this third one to you, which is one that's not as well thought of in organizations and are often even used or people are not aware of them in organizations. It's called direct output support. So in this example, if I'm the director and I need to do something for my own direct output, but I don't have enough information, I can delegate certain aspects of work to my subordinates to provide me input so that I can do my work well. So, for instance, if I have to build a new line, so I'm accountable for 5 lines in an assembly plant, and I have to build a 6th line. So I'm going to have output support from other parts of the organization, but I might pull together a team of my subordinates to give me advice on what is the leading edge equipment, what are some of the issues we have, some of the other lines that we'd like to overcome, what are some of the process improvements that we might need, what might be shift changes. So rather than myself as the director doing all of this, I will ask the people that I know to provide that work to me. Now, they're not outputting this work directly. They are creating information for me to use to make my decisions so that I can do my work appropriately. And the reason this is important is that it really impacts on what the nature of a meeting is. So for a meeting to be successful, we need to be aware both of the purpose of the meeting, which I talked to earlier, is it formal or informal, or what do we hope to achieve by the meeting, but secondly, what is the nature of the work that is expected from that meeting? So that's a little bit of theory in terms of the setup that I wanted to give to you, and then now I will come around to the actual aspect of meetings. This is a coin, I thought I termed it, so I put this slide together yesterday, meetingitis, which is a noun, the act or the process of an uncontrolled proliferation of meetings in an organization. So the definition is mine, but I did do a search this morning on the web, and I find that meetingitis is, I should have guessed, is a term that's used in organizations. So it is the proliferation of meetings in organizations. And there is a tendency for meetings to grow in organizations, and if they're left uncontrolled, it's like an invasive species in a protective environment that can really take over. So if you think of the types of meetings that are typically in organizations, I put together a bit of a list here. You might have your senior management team meeting, which is the CEO and the CEO's subordinates. Every manager in the organization probably has team meetings. There could be daily briefing meetings. There could be a capital projects group which would come together on a monthly or a quarterly basis. If you're putting in an ERP, you might have a process group that is providing that. IT tends to have support groups in place. The operations managers might come together on an informal basis or a formal basis from time to time. So in each of these cases, there are very good reasons for these kinds of meetings to take place. But the issue is that there becomes a sense in the organization and the individuals that the meetings are important for the sake of the meeting. And therefore, we have the meeting whether or not, in fact, we actually need the meeting. So the cure that I would propose is rather drastic. I would suggest that you take the Greenfield approach and cancel, in principle, all standing meetings in your organization. And think back to this structure, which I've shown you before, which is the accountability framework. You have an accountability framework in your organization where each manager is accountable for producing work. So they're accountable and they have authority. They've been delegated resources to transform those resources into value-added output for the organization. And in total, all employees working together to meet the strategy of the organization. So if we start with that accountability and authority framework, these are the questions that I would ask. I'd say, who is accountable for the work? So if we take that example of the capital projects group, from the perspective of the CEO, who is the one individual in the organization that's accountable for our capital projects? Who is it that I want to hold accountable, to gather information, to pull people together, to make recommendations, to monitor the process, and so on? Name that individual, then be absolutely clear with that individual about the accountability that they have, and then provide them with the authority to consult as necessary for them to be able to successfully do their work. And here's where we come into that little nuance that I set up for you. So for delegated direct output and direct output work, they are delegated the authority to make a decision, get on with the work, and produce the output. In the second instance, for direct output support work, they're delegated the authority to gather information pull together their recommendation and make that recommendation to another party, probably me as their manager, so that I can do my direct output work. So this nuance of is the group that's being pulled together making helping the chair of that group to make a decision, or are they helping the chair of that group and as a group coming up with a recommendation, is a really important distinction that can help a meeting become more productive. So having then set this framework in place, if the best way of getting the work done is to call a meeting, then the individual that's accountable for that work will have the authority to pull together the people that they need to either gather information, disseminate information, or exchange viewpoints so that they can come up with a result that is going to be helpful. In the second last bullet, ensure that best practices meeting mechanics are used. So just because there are standard principles around good meeting mechanics doesn't mean that everyone follows them. So as the head of the organization or the head of HR or in fact a manager that wants to do well, acquaint yourself with these. There's all kinds of good, solid information that's freely available on the web to make sure that you're running your meetings as effectively as possible when you need to have a meeting. And then let the people get on with their work. So lack of clarity then really is, and those of you again that attend my previous webinars will know that this is one of the key issues that faces managers today is this lack of clarity. So it's really lack of clarity of accountability and authority that is one of the greatest causes of meetingitis. If a manager is not clear about their authority to be able to make a decision, then that manager will tend to try to seek consensus from everybody that's going to be involved in the decision that needs to be made. So if I need to do something and I'm not clear about my accountability and my authority with respect to doing that, rather than step on toes, I'm going to start calling people together. And if I don't realize I have the authority to make the decision, then I need to build consensus. And that's going to generate a lot of meetings, because to build consensus, you need to pull people together, you need to convince, you need to discuss, you need to try to arrive at trade-offs so that everyone can agree. Rather, it's much more effective for the individual to know that they have the authority to make the decision, pull people together, seek their opinion, try to find what the absolute best trade-off is. Absolutely, you don't want to ignore people, you don't want to ignore other processes and procedures, but at the end of the day, someone needs to have the authority to make a decision for what is the best solution for the organization, as opposed to the consensus-driven organization. I'm sorry, the consensus-driven decision, which may not be, in fact, the optimal decision for the organization. The third bullet in here is similar, and that is, even though the authority might be in place for a manager to make a decision, they may be reluctant to make the decision. Because that does require a certain amount of it requires a person to exercise their authority and to make a decision, and in not all cases is the decision liked by everyone that's involved in the process. So in those cases, a manager may be reluctant to make the hard call. I would say that one of the biggest value adds that managers have to provide their organization is to make those hard calls and to make decisions which are in the best interests of the organization overall. So those managers who are reluctant to make decisions may try to build consensus, create meetings, pull people together, create unnecessary time wasters, in my opinion, in terms of being able to do that work. So they would need to be coached by their manager to ensure that they do understand they need to use their authority in the appropriate way. It's kind of a footnote, but it's so important I wanted to put in a slide on it, and that is that meetings are also required for managerial leadership. So up until now, I've been talking more about strategy-driven or operationally driven objectives that an individual is accountable for delivering. So the point here is that for me to do these are the 5 requirements of effective managers. For me to plan, to do my value-added work, to set context and boundaries, to delegate, and to establish feedback loops, I am going to need to hold meetings to be able to do that work. I'm going to need to have one-on-one meetings with each one of my subordinates. I'm going to need to have team meetings with my entire team of subordinates. I may have to have meetings with peers in the organization to work out how we work together for the benefit of the organization. And I may have to have meetings outside of the organization with stakeholder groups or others that I would have an interest in, or who have an interest in my part of the organization. So so everything I've said up until now, I do not want to take away from the importance of those meetings. I would in fact suggest that in organizations that we would regularize the one-on-one meetings, the team meetings, and from time to time these team and second level meetings. So particularly for the CEO, it makes sense from time to time, maybe on a quarterly basis, maybe more often if there's a lot of change in the organization, to pull together the subordinate managers and each one of their direct reports. So it's a three-level meeting. And in that way, the CEO can set context not only for the subordinate managers, but also at that next level down. So that entire group, the three levels, are receiving the same message at the same time in the same way. That can be a very, very powerful tool. The trick is that you need to use it in an appropriate way. The thing to watch out for in managerial leadership meetings is that as the manager, you are accountable for your team meetings, and you are accountable for using the mechanics, the best practices for meetings. So the time really does need to be used wisely. It can be used to provide information that's useful to everyone. So I would say that is improving context for subordinates in the organization. It can be used to gather information that will be helpful to the manager, and it can stimulate related information. So this is the point I made earlier. By gathering information in a group, it's like a focus group. You can build on each other's information and really help. And you can seek input into decisions that you need to make so that you're really able to add value as a manager. The thing to avoid, and actually, if I should have maybe even made a bullet here about this. The thing to avoid, and I see this happen all the time, and this is where managers really misuse the time of their subordinates for team meetings, is what they do is have a series of one-on-one meetings in the group. So the CEO, for instance, might have the CFO, the head of HR, the head of our operations, and so on in the meeting. And because everyone's there, the CEO will discuss a finance issue with the head of finance. And then once that issue is resolved, we'll go on to talk about an HR issue with the head of HR. So there's probably some mild interest for everyone else to be hearing that conversation, but the CEO needs to ask, is it really important that everyone hear this conversation, or is it a better use of this group's time for me to have this conversation one-on-one in a different environment and really focus in on value-added items that everyone in the group can participate in. The other thing to watch for in your meetings, and I used the CEO as an example there, but that applies in every management team meeting. In fact, I think CEOs are probably among the best in terms of keeping to strategic agenda items. It often is misused more at lower levels of the organization because they may not come together as regularly. The second item that I wanted to raise was more with respect to how managers would use their time with each other. So having a focus group type of a meeting in this situation is actually very, very helpful. So I don't want to undermine that point which I made earlier. So coming back to clarity then is I want to bring this back to the research that we did in 2013. And here we found out very clearly that clarity of accountability leads to clarity of action. So if an individual is clear about what they are accountable for, they are better able to take initiatives and make decisions that will be consistent with what you as a manager would expect them to do and to make decisions on. And it also improves the clarity of interaction, because if you have clarity equal clarity across the organization, then individuals have a better idea of how to relate with each other in the organization. And our research showed that managers, in fact, are only spending 55% of their time doing what they would call value-added work. So this is to me was an amazing finding, that managers are spending almost half of their time on work that isn't value-added, and attending meetings they shouldn't have to attend is part of that. Seeking consensus on something that they should be able to decide is part of that. Calling meetings to seek consensus in areas because they're unwilling to make a decision, create some of this for others in the organization. So I think meetings, when I ask people to fill in the text box about what some of the things are that get in the way of them being as effective as they could be, meetings is almost universally recognized. So we do have a tool now called the Effective Manager Survey, which is a tool that can be used by CEOs or heads of HR to really look at the organization and find out what aspects of systems and processes in the organization are having the most significant impact on manager effectiveness. Sometimes that can be good. Sometimes that can be a hurdle and actually gets in the way of people being as effective as they can. You can see the bullets here. I don't need to say any more on this one, except that it is a tool that is much less invasive than the employee engagement survey, and it really does get to root cause. Employee engagement surveys tend, which provide good information, don't get me wrong on that, but they tend to focus on symptoms. So for instance, poor communication and poor collaboration are two that I see on every employee engagement survey that I've ever seen. And the reason for that is not because there's poor communication necessarily in the organization or that there's poor collaboration or lack of willingness to collaborate. It's because the accountability and authority framework in the organization isn't appropriate. But that's a whole other story, and I do have a webinar on that topic by itself. So that is the content that I had. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into that box, into that question box while I'm just wrapping up here. I did want to point out that the next several webinars, actually through March, actually maybe even into early April, are now scheduled. The next one is on partner firms. We've been establishing collaborative relationships with other management consulting firms to deliver the the Effective Managers Survey to their clients. And I thought it would be interesting, this will primarily be interesting I think for management consultants, but practitioners as well may be interested in terms of how the survey is really used at the mechanical level in terms of understanding what's happening in organizations and how we can help clients to have more effective, higher performing organizations. And then on February 11th, we'll be doing one on why should I trust a management consultant. Very often I do get questions about what is the best value add from management consulting, and that would be a fun seminar for people to get information on. So that does bring me to the close of the formal part of the webinar. I do thank you for your participation. I'd remind you that I do have a wealth of information available on the Effective Managers website, so please do feel free to visit there. I do have an article on do we really need to have this meeting, and there are related articles that it's linked to when you go there. And we also have a search engine, so you can search on various topics that might be of interest to you. If you'd be interested in daily tips on managing, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at Dwight Mahowitz, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to maintain connections with anyone. So that brings us to the half hour. I have no questions up. It was a fairly straightforward subject. I do, again, thank you for this. There's a very brief survey that will pop up when we log off. I'd very much appreciate your completing the survey. So if you have any feedback for me on how I can improve these webinars, I would very much appreciate that. And if any questions occur to you, you can ask them in the one of those text boxes, and I'll get back to you on that. Finally, the last thing I want to say is that tomorrow you will get a follow-up email that comes from the system, so you'll have my email address in front of you if you do want to get in touch with me after thinking about this for a day. day or so. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dwight Mahalitz, President of Effective Managers. Thank you so much for downloading the webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and will find it useful. Feel free to check out other parts of the website for interesting downloads. Most are free, some are at a nominal charge, but I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting tools there and things that can help you be more effective. And in fact, that's what my job is. My job is to help you, help your organization be higher performing. The bottom line is that I want to start where you are, understand your problem, and provide services that can help you solve that problem and implement a solution as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Give me a call, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you, talk about your situation, and see if there's anything that we can do together. Thank you.